everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Damn Canada with me, Dee Dee. If you're new here, hi, hello, and welcome. It's great to have you here on Damn Canada. I like to cover all the lesser known murder, mystery, and mayhem cases that go on here in Canada and Canada only. So if that's something you're interested in, I hope I see you around again. Today we are going to the lower mainlands of British Columbia and back to 2007, almost 15 years ago to date. Bryan Braumberger was like any typical 18-year-old. He liked playing soccer, he loved music, he liked playing video games and hanging out with friends. And most of all, he absolutely loved his 1988 Honda CRX. He was a very likable character, he was funny and charming, and just an all-around good kid that stayed out of trouble. He also had a great relationship with his parents, had a part-time job, and also was a creature of habit, with always coming home at night to check in and eat and shower before going to bed before the next day. From the outside looking in, it seemed like Bryan had everything going for him at 18 years old. And so when his car was found abandoned one day with no trace of Bryan in sight, everyone knew something was wrong. On the evening of Thursday, May 31st of 2007, Bryan Braumberger was hanging out at one of his buddies' house in New Westminster, playing video games, watching TV, and just hanging out. Eventually it got to be around midnight and Bryan had to work the next day. So him and his buddy walked out of the house and around to the church parking lot, which was beside his buddy's house where Bryan's car was parked. Bryan told his friend how he was going to go home and sleep since he had to work the next day in the morning. And at 12:15 a.m. on June 1st, Bryan drove off towards his family home in Burnaby, which was around a 5-minute drive. Later on that day on June 1st, the police located Bryan's vehicle at the George Derby Center, which was about 2 minutes away from his home. It was never stated if someone called Bryan's car into the station for being parked there, or if the police had just happened to drive by and think it was suspicious. But either way, when the police went to Bryan's car, they noted that the headlights were on, but there were no keys found. The doors were closed but unlocked, and Bryan's driver's license was in the glove compartment. With there being no indication that there was any kind of struggle or anything like that, Bryan's car was towed and a voicemail was left at Bryan's family home for him regarding that his car was towed. Back at Bryan's home, his parents Janice and Ron were just arriving back home from their week-long vacation and were somewhat surprised to not see Bryan around to greet them. When they checked their voicemail, there was a message from Bryan's employer mentioning how Bryan hadn't shown up for work that day. With Bryan being dependable and a creature of habit, his parents were a little alarmed by this. Bryan's parents then heard the voicemail from the police and how Bryan's car had been towed, and they thought that this was weird. Bryan adored that car. He even referred to it as his baby. He wouldn't just leave his car somewhere for it to be towed. With Janice and Ron having an ever-growing feeling that something was wrong, they waited around for Bryan to come home till around 3 a.m. on June 2nd, and knowing that there was just no way Bryan wouldn't come home to eat, shower, and check in with them like he always did, they phoned the police and informed them that Bryan was missing. The police, now knowing that the vehicle they towed earlier belonged to a now missing person, they went back and examined the vehicle and the area that it was found, but unfortunately no evidence was found or any information pointing to where Bryan had gone. Search and rescue efforts were started with police, dogs, and 25 volunteers from the Coquitlam Search and Rescue, and they covered the entire 5.5 hectares of the George Derby Conservation over a 3-day period. The manager for the search and rescue team explained in a press release that they were searching the area just in case Bryan had crossed through and gotten hurt. He also added that the terrain was more difficult than they had anticipated, with there being much more heavy bush, high grass, and swampy areas and ravines. On June 4th, a Facebook page was made for him called Missing Bryan Braumberger, with the first post listing the known details of Bryan's last whereabouts. Now, like I had mentioned, this is taking place back in 2007. Facebook technically didn't even have what we know as groups and everything till 2010. And Facebook itself had only opened up to non-students in 2005, just 2 years prior. And I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure the whole pages aspect of Facebook wasn't launched until early 2007. So for them to make this page for Bryan, I wouldn't doubt that this was one of the first missing persons pages on Facebook for a single person. And yes, I'm sure there was other missing persons pages. I'm sure he wasn't the very first one. But the reason I'm saying this is just to emphasize that using this technique was extremely new, especially compared to nowadays, where a group being created for a missing person is one of the first steps done after that person isn't found right away. And so with anything that's relatively new to society, it's no surprise that the Facebook group was getting a little bit of hate, with people saying, how will a Facebook group help find him? And just rude things like that also don't help find him. But this group, page, whatever you want to call it, actually got Bryan a lot of attention from people who possibly would have never known or even gotten involved with the searching efforts. So I did want to just throw out a props to the person that created the page. I think her name was Amanda. This was such a smart move for early on and back then. So the Facebook page was created on June 4th, and good thing too, because on June 5th, the Vancouver Sun had released somewhat false information. I don't want to say it was false, but more like the wording of things was weird and people misunderstood. From what I could gather, they had reported that there was a message left, which they were referring to the voicemail the police had left, but it was misinterpreted and people thought that Bryan had left a note. Now, thankfully, the Facebook page was up because the family was able to clarify right away that Bryan did not leave any kind of note behind when people started asking. A lot of people were posting on the page as well, asking how they could get involved and help. And Bryan's older brother Trevor shared a missing persons poster for Bryan, along with saying people can post it up around if they would like to help, and also adding that the search and rescuers are only using their professional team at the moment, which is very typical for an initial search and rescue. Like I had mentioned in my last video, a lot of effort does go into the training for search and rescue, and you want to make sure it's done right. And by June 7th, people were commenting in the group, mentioning how there were posters up everywhere. By June 14th, 2 weeks later, there was still no trace of Bryan. They didn't find anything at all to indicate where he had went or what happened to him. There were no signs of struggle anywhere. His car had no signs of anything. There was no blood, there was no weird fibers, and I believe they didn't find any suspicious fingerprints either. When I say there was literally no trace of what happened to him, I'm not exaggerating. So Trevor made a post that read, "Still no word on Bryan's whereabouts. Police are doing everything they can. Everyone is still putting up posters and praying for him to come back to us. But I know someone knows something about what happened to Bryan. We need them to come forward and tell us what they know. This has gone on too long. 13 days. Please call police or Crime Stoppers." Unfortunately, like many missing persons cases that go on past a week or two, the attention for Bryan's case started to slow down. The Facebook page started to have less and less posts, and for some reason it seemed like people were starting to leave the group, although no one really knows why. But on June 25th, the page was hit with a whole new wave of comments, all expressing the same disgust from the recent news. On the evening of Monday, June 18th, a phone call came into the residence of the Braumbergers, telling them to check their mailbox. The family ran out to the mailbox to find a ransom note demanding a specified amount of cash in return for information on Bryan. The family went right to the police with this new information with a whole new feeling of hope. They had already agreed amongst themselves that they'll pay any ransom to get Bryan back. An intense investigation was started to find out who sent this ransom note, praying that this would lead to a safe and unharmed Bryan. Unfortunately, this would not be the case. 3 days later, on June 21st, a 20-year-old man from Burnaby named Shokai Hussain, I'll have the name up on the screen, was arrested and charged by the police with extortion. Sadly, this was nothing more than a cruel, heartless hoax that stripped away the family's hope of seeing Bryan all over again. Shokai Hussein was released on bail with a court date for July 16th, and while out on bail, he got to do a little news interview where he was asked why he did this, and he had many excuses from "it was a joke" to "I was bored one day," and he even had the nerve to state at one point he wanted to give a little hope. There's just no words for some people's actions. On July 1st, Bryan was officially missing for 1 full month. And I'll just read you the post made by Ron, Bryan's dad, to know how they were feeling this day. This is Ron, Trevor and Bryan's dad. It has been 1 month that Bryan has been missing. It is hard to explain what our family has been going through. It is like a bad dream that never ends. I still believe someone knows where Bryan is or what happened to him. If you have heard anything about where Bryan is or what happened to him, please call Crime Stoppers or the Burnaby Police. We need to put an end to this nightmare one way or another. On Friday morning of July 6th, a police press conference was held where Janice, Bryan's mother, announced that there was a $10,000 reward for Bryan's safe return and the conviction of anyone responsible for his disappearance. At the time, she also said the family is hopeful Bryan is still alive, but the longer Bryan is missing, the harder it is to stay optimistic. Along with the reward money being announced, the RCMP spokesman, Corporal Dan Carr, wanted to clarify about the homicide team joining in and saying, although Bryan's disappearance is suspicious, the fact that the case has been taken over by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team in no way indicates that the police believe Bryan is dead. Adding that the team's mandate is to become involved in suspicious cases, and the Burnaby RCMP needed the additional manpower. By this point, there wasn't much action going on the Facebook page for Bryan. On July 20th, Trevor made this heart-wrenching post. Well, it looks like all the tips and leads have been followed up and the police have nothing more to go on. Somehow, we have to learn to live with not knowing what happened to Bryan. Thanks for all your help. And I just gotta say, the not knowing aspect of a missing persons case has to be the worst part of it. I just can't imagine the not knowing and just the endless amount of questions. My uncle was murdered many years ago, and I have always said that at least I know what happened to him and at least I know where he is. Because that not knowing would have drove me absolutely insane. So August 1st, of course, was the second month with no Bryan and no trace at all of where he went. This time it was Janice who posted through Trevor's Facebook. Her post read, "This is Janice, Trevor and Bryan's mom. It's been 2 months today that Bryan has been missing and still we are no closer to finding out what happened. Will this nightmare go on forever? It's not something any family should ever have to endure. We miss him so much and will continue to hope a miracle happens and he is returned to us. Hopefully one day soon we will have that missing piece of info that we so desperately need. Please keep all your positive thoughts coming our way." 2 weeks later, on August 14th, it was Bryan's 19th birthday. "This is Janice again. Today is Bryan's 19th birthday. As a parent, I should be concerned about getting food into him before he goes out to party with his friends. Instead, I wonder when I will see him again. We awaken each day with such a sense of sadness, with fear, confusion, anger. We have so many questions that need answers. We can't let this happen to anyone else. We still hope that if someone knows something, the truth will come out soon." At the 3-month mark of Bryan's disappearance, Trevor expressed his anger and frustration. 3 months today. Unbelievable. How can this happen? And at the 4-month mark, Janice had now joined Facebook and made her own post reading, "We still have no news to report. Bryan has been missing for 4 months today. The pain doesn't ease. It grows deeper with each passing day. We miss him so much." And when that 5-month mark came on November 1st, there were no posts made. I'm sure that heartbreak was just becoming too much to handle. On the 6-month mark of Bryan's disappearance, Janice made a small but heartfelt post. "P.S. It's snowing today. Bryan loves the snow." Just a few days after Bryan had been missing for 6 months, on December 3rd, the family made a press release stating that they were no closer to finding out why or how Bryan disappeared. They also announced that the reward money was now at $30,000, thanks to a $10,000 donation from the Missing Children Society and another $10,000 donation from Janice's credit union employer. At this press release, the police also released new information to the public about the night Bryan went missing. The original report stated that Bryan was last seen in that church parking lot on 8th Avenue in New Westminster at around 12:15 a.m. But the police said that new information revealed that Bryan was actually seen 45 minutes later at the corner of Austin Ave and Marmont Street in Coquitlam at 1 a.m. Later, Crime Stoppers would add he was last seen driving south down Marmont Street from Austin Ave around 1:30 a.m., and I came across a few more articles that said this as well. I also read that his car stereo was left untouched, and so this ruled out robbery as a possible motive. Christmas just wasn't the same for the Braumbergers that year. It's hard to enjoy anything with such a void in your life. In the new year of 2008, people were still posting in the group here and there, with people saying that there were still posters up everywhere. And by February 10th, people were starting to turn towards Bryan's Facebook page again to ask a very hair-raising question. Does anyone else think Bryan's disappearance is in connection with the 3 other young men that have gone missing? Yeah, you heard that right. There had been at least 3 more young, fit, clean-shaven, good-looking men that had gone missing with eerie similarities to Bryan's case. And as time went on, more and more young men completely vanished without a trace. On March 19th, another young man went missing named Keelan McElwee, and as the news got out, this brought even more people to Bryan's page. It was hard to miss the similarities, so much so that even Bryan's family members were starting to question it. And just as a side note for all of you super true crime fans, Robert Pickton, one of Canada's most prolific serial killers, was just caught back in 2002 and convicted in late 2007. So the thought of a serial killer was fresh on people's minds. And if you aren't aware, to put it extremely lightly, he was picking up sex workers from the downtown Vancouver area and taking them back to his pig farm in Port Coquitlam and doing terrible, unthinkable things to them. And this went on for years and years. So the people of British Columbia, and especially this area of Vancouver, Burnaby, and Coquitlam, were very much starting to wonder, is there another serial killer operating here? On top of that, it's pretty hard to forget the fact that the Vancouver police completely butchered the Robert Pickton case so very badly. If there was another potential serial killer, would they mess up again and totally miss the signs? And since we are on this little sidebar, I feel this is probably a good time to add that all of these young men going missing was all around the same time that the feet and shoes started washing up on the beaches in BC. Now, even though this has been going on since 2006, it's really not spoken about that much. So you may remember it, you may not, but you may actually know it from just semi-recent TikToks about it. But basically, since 2006, I believe, mostly men's with the occasional females' shoes have been washing up on the beaches of BC. And all either have a human foot still in the shoe or skeletal remains. Since 2006, there have been over 20 shoes with feet to have washed up on that coast. Now, I've done a very small amount of research into this topic, just a little bit for this video. So in no way am I well informed on this specific topic, but basically the police, when asked about the feet being washed up on the beaches, they say that almost all are connected back to an actual person, and they are either from suicides or accidents. But when just doing a little bit of research into it, I was able to find out pretty quickly that that doesn't seem to be the case at all. If anything, the majority of them have not been connected back to a person or anything like that. Now, on top of that, no bodies have washed up. It's just been the shoes with feet. And some shoes have even had the pairs wash up, so they actually have a full set of feet. It's weird to say. All right, now I'm going to try and explain this as best as I can, so bear with me here. But experts have come out and said that the reason that just the shoes with the feet are washing up is because when a body is in the water, the animals tend to go towards the ankles and cartilage, things like that first. And so the feet will break off from the body first. And since the way shoes have been made has changed in recent years, making them more buoyant, when the feet break off from the body and it's still intact in the casing of the shoe, it floats up to the top due to the buoyancy and eventually washes up on the beaches with the foot still in the shoe. That makes sense? Now, just in my own personal opinion, I kind of get the feeling that the feet being found on the beaches but not being connected to people and stuff, I kind of feel like it's trying to be pushed under the rug and be easily explained away. But that could just be me. That's just the vibes I get from it anyways. I'm curious what you guys think though. But that's the end of my little side notes. Let's go back to the story. On May 11th of 2008, it was Janice's first Mother's Day without Bryan. Her post read, "Today is meant to be a happy, fun, special day for all the mothers in the world. But sadly, for many, it's not. This is a tough world we live in, and you never know what will come your way. I know if Bryan could, he would give me a big hug today. I will spend today thinking not about how much I miss him, but about all the special times we shared and the funny things we would say and do, things that make me laugh and smile. To all you mothers out there, have a wonderful day. To all you children out there, help make your Mother's Day wonderful and tell them you love them even though they already know." The summer months were sad and hard to enjoy. On June 1st marked the 1-year anniversary of Bryan's disappearance. And on June 12th, another young man went missing. August 14th should have been a celebration of Bryan's 20th birthday, but no one knows how he got to celebrate or if he got to celebrate. And that year for Christmas, all Janice wanted was to know where her son was. As the months and years went by, more and more young men went missing, with very few of them having answers to what happened to them. 2 full years went by with no trace of Bryan, no updates, just nothing. Janice posted on June 1st of 2009, "It's hard to believe that 2 whole years have passed and we are no closer to finding the answers we so desperately need. As I struggle through every day, my mind is crazy with thoughts of what happened and why. Today, I will think about all the good things, all Bryan's weird little quirks, the little things he did growing up, the laughs we shared, and the love he was never shy to express." Janice also said in an interview in 2009, "There was nothing in the car. There was nothing around the car. There was no signs of a struggle. There was no blood. There was nothing, just his car. I don't think we're missing anything, but it's as if the earth opened up and swallowed him. It's hard to believe none of these men have been found. Why aren't there any bodies?" Ron also said in an interview in 2009, "I don't know if it's connected or what, but look how long it took them to connect the missing women downtown in Vancouver," referring to the Robert Pickton case. The next year, on the 3rd anniversary of Bryan's disappearance, a news story was done and Bryan's father, Ron, was interviewed. Ron expressed how it was a living hell and how not knowing is the hardest part. They still put up posters and they love the media coverage to keep his name up and out there. Ron said they will never stop until they find him or find out what happened to him. And when it comes to speaking about Bryan's disappearance, he would much rather people acknowledge it instead of pretending that everything's just fine. He would much rather talk about Bryan than the recent Canucks game. In 2010, the spokesman for the RCMP Homicide Investigation Team, Corporal Dan Carr, said that the length of time and lack of information suggests Bryan is a victim of foul play. He also stated that the $30,000 reward has never been touched and said that that cash could help someone start a new life. In 2012, an article on VancouversAwesome.com went over Bryan's disappearance again, but also reiterated how the similarities between the missing men from 2006 onward in the lower mainlands of BC is terrifying. All are men, and all of them are young or have a young appearance. All of them were fit and in good shape. All of them had short hair. They were all clean shaven, and most of them disappeared after a night out on their way home. And none of them had any known or obvious ties to gangs or any kind of criminal activity. They were all just normal guys. Now, initially I wanted to list off all of the men that had gone missing over the years, but I kid you not, there are over 80. And that's just from the small amount of research I've done. People have been on top of these disappearances since day one. They have collected info and all of that, and because of the undeniable similarities in the missing men's cases, the RCMP have said that they did do their own investigation to see if they could find any hard evidence to tie the cases together. But to date, they are adamant that there is no evidence to tie any of the cases to one another. Ron had also expressed how Canada needed to create a national DNA database, saying that there's always a chance that Bryan's body had been found in a different province, but without such a database, the family would never know. Ron wasn't the only one with those thoughts and feelings, though. Judy Peterson, who is the mother of Lindsay Nichols, who went missing when she was 14 years old back in 1993 on Vancouver Island, launched a campaign back in 2002 pressuring the provincial and federal governments to create such a databank. She called the campaign Lindsay's Law and was lobbying for changes to Canada's DNA Identification Act. Judy worked tirelessly to get Lindsay's Law into effect. In 2014, some good news came with the federal government committing $8 million to expanding the database so coroners, medical examiners, and police could centralize their DNA indexes. Judy was finally successful with Lindsay's Law, with the national DNA database expanding to include DNA from missing persons across Canada in 2018. Yeah, you heard that right. It took till 2018. Judy signed the consent form to add Lindsay's DNA into the databank on Friday, March 9th of 2018, and that made Lindsay Nichols become the first missing person to have their DNA included. As the years have gone by, Bryan's friends and family have tried to move on with their lives. They've moved on to having careers, they've gotten married and had children, but they never forget about Bryan, with the little reminders everywhere, like playing soccer with their kids like they used to do with Bryan. Or when Pokemon Go came out, they all knew Bryan would have loved that so much. All these events in their lives that should just be simple fun memories always have a linger of sadness behind them from not knowing where Bryan is or what happened to him. Every once in a while, they turn to Bryan's Facebook page to express their feelings of not having him around or to share their fond memories. And that's actually where I want to leave off on today's video. Bryan would be turning 34 years old this year in August, and on June 1st of this year, it will be the 15-year anniversary of the disappearance of Bryan. So if you knew Bryan and you're watching this video, I ask that, if you feel like it of course, maybe share some of your favorite memories of him, either here or on the Facebook page. Let's let the family know that Bryan is not forgotten and that we still all really want answers for them. If you have any information on the disappearance of Bryan Braumberger, you can contact Crime Stoppers online through their app or you can call 1-800-222-TIPS or 8477. At the time of Bryan's disappearance, he was 18 years old, 185 pounds with a fit build, 6 foot tall. He had light brown hair and was clean shaven. Bryan was last seen wearing a black t-shirt, shorts, and white Adidas runners with no laces. That is all the information I have on the disappearance of Bryan Braumberger. I don't know what my thoughts are when it comes to this case. Of course, I find the fact that so many other young men in that area have gone missing over the years quite alarming. I kind of want to do a video just on that topic alone, of just maybe covering all of the missing men in a timeline format. I even kind of want to cover the whole shoes being washed up thing, because that's really weird. But I don't know. I don't know how somebody can just get in their car and drive away and then vanish with just their car being left. Like, was he abducted by aliens or something? Like, what the fuck? Like, I can't imagine that kind of not knowing for the family. It frustrates me just reading the case, and I don't even know him. Like, ugh. Maybe one thing I kind of have questions about, but that's just because I don't know what the police know and the family knows, of course. But is that I'm kind of curious why the information about Bryan being in Coquitlam at 1:30 a.m. instead of being last known in Westminster at 12:15 a.m. didn't come out until 6 months later. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, did someone hold on to that information for 6 months? That's a little bit suspicious, of course. Or did it just take 6 months for the police to confirm that last sighting? Who really knows? That's the only thing that I kind of raised my eyebrows to, I guess. And the one other thing, I guess, that we don't have, like, the information on would be when the police picked up his car from towing. I'm just wondering how long of a time frame it was from him being seen driving off at 1:30 a.m. Like, what time on June 1st was his car picked up? Was it earlier in the morning? So it was like 5-hour time frame of when he went missing and the car was found. I don't know. I think maybe that information being released could have helped a little bit, especially for people in that area. Maybe somebody was up at that time. Who knows? I guess that's the only thing I thought maybe. That's literally the only thing I was like, would have probably been helpful, but what do I know? So also with that whole 12:15 a.m. Westminster to Coquitlam 1:30 a.m. I've thought about that, and I remember back to my high school days. They have said that Bryan didn't have a cell phone, and so thinking back to like MSN days, all of that stuff, if I had to rationalize a scenario, I would think maybe he was at his buddy's house and he said, yeah, man, I'm getting tired, gotta work in the morning. And that was 12:15. Maybe he got home and went online, and then somebody was like, yo, come out, we're driving our cars around, because he was into his Honda CRX and really into his car. So if he was also in that cruising around car scene, I could easily see him going online when he gets home and then somebody saying, yo, want to go for a cruise for an hour? And him being like, yeah, sure. And then he left the house again and then drove out to Coquitlam. But on the other hand, I have no idea if 1:30 a.m. is a late time for Bryan to be out, or if that's like an average time for him. I was a huge night owl back in that time, and I would stay up till like 3 or 4 a.m. So 1:30 a.m. seems early to me, but that might not have been the case for Bryan's regular routine, if you know what I'm trying to say. But whatever, I'm done rambling and not making any sense. I hope you guys can understand when I'm just like saying my words. I have trouble with that. That's why I write out all of my scripts. But okay, I'm just going to stop rambling right here. If you guys got something out of today's video, let me know with hitting that thumbs up button. That really helps me out. It helps with the algorithm. It helps with getting these cases out to the public because they are so lesser known. But that's all I have to say for today. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful evening, weekend, whatever the heck is going on with you. And that is all. This is what happens when I don't write an end to my script. See you later, alligator. There's a blue jay outside. Aww.